everybody, welcome to today's video, how to write in the third person. I've been asked to do this by lots of student nurses and nursing associates to help with essays because writing in the third person is considered the best perspective to write in for academic writing. So it's a skill that you can learn, it's going to help improve your marks, and I'll give you some simple narrative examples today. There are odd times where you might use the word I or the researcher or the author, which I'll talk through as well. So I hope you find this video helpful. If you do, don't forget to give it a thumbs up or a like on YouTube. So if we look at the first and third person point of view in writing, they're the most popular and they're the most used in nursing and healthcare essays. So what do we mean by these terms? They just relate to this perspective that an author is conveying in a story, or in your case as a nurse it would be writing an assignment, a reflection, a project report or a dissertation. So first person is told from the perspective of you in one individual voice, and you use words such as I, me, my, myself, or we, us, our, ourselves. I felt, I observed. An example might be I discharged a patient. Second person narrative, which is not used in academic writing, you use the word you rather than I, and second person perspective is used more in creative literary stories to build up tension. For example, you might use you, your, yours or yourself. So it could be you discharged a patient, you missed out the paperwork. So it's almost like you were talking to yourself. Third person is written as an outsider looking in, and it allows for what's called narrative distance. So you may use words such as she, he, they, them, themselves, their, theirs, or just name the role, the doctor, patient, physio, for example. So an example would be the patient was discharged. Rather than saying I discharged a patient, you'd be saying the patient was discharged, or the patient discharge took place or occurred with a lack of preparation, for example. In the third person, you can give opinions, you can describe what's happening, you are observing, hearing, experiencing, and describing that, and you can relate that to analysis without saying I. So you're almost acting as a mediator, relaying what you're observing, what you're experiencing in a reflective essay. And if it's report writing or a publication, you're keeping it factual and underpinned with evidence. So always check your university rules. If you're writing your first reflective essay, there's usually flexibility, and sometimes it's much easier to use the word I for the first time when you're writing an assignment for your first time. But you do need to develop writing in the third person later because it's an academic writing skill that you can learn. So do check those university rules. So sometimes the only option you have is to use the term I, or you might use the term the author or the researcher. And that's because you're writing something quite personal and it just doesn't make sense, or it would be confusing to the reader if you didn't state this. It's not very often you need to do this, so you need to do it as little as possible. But it's usually because you need to be specific about context. It needs to be correct, so the reader doesn't think that you're talking about somebody else. So the example I'm going to give is I'm currently writing up my PhD, which is why I look so tired. And I have 3 sentences in my PhD write-up where I have had to put the researcher. And so the sentence is, the researcher did not recruit participants directly. Or I could have wrote, participants were not directly recruited by the researcher. But I had to be specific about the recruitment processes. Whichever way I tried to write that sentence on my research proposal or my ethics application, I had to be clear that I did not influence the recruitment of participants. So there was no other way of making that clear without me putting the researcher. Otherwise, I've written the PhD in the third person. So you may come across odd sentences like that where it's just so difficult and it's confusing to the reader that you put I or my, for example. So before I present some slides comparing first person versus third person examples, I thought I'd just go over what the advantages and limitations of third person are. So Third person point of view is considered the best perspective to write in academic writing, and you can include multiple perspectives and angles in a clinical area. Even though you're writing objectively from an outsider type of point of view, you could be an insider on placement and you're using lots of observations and different perspectives to support your critical analysis. So it can be more objective, it can be more detached and factual, which can aid analysis, and more credible and acceptable in writing research papers and reports. Publications will always expect third person writing, and dissertations and publications, or any other sort of professional writing. The disadvantage of it is that sometimes you become more detached, you lose intimacy when you're describing emotions, for example, but that can be overcome using your narrative. So, for example, instead of saying I felt the patient was distressed, you'd be describing what happened. The patient displayed signs of distress, such as, and can list them. So sometimes you need to write a little bit more detail maybe. So the easiest way to develop your writing style using the third person is to look at examples. And I remember a tutor years ago, I just didn't get how to write in the third person when she was explaining it. And she literally changed a whole page of my assignment, writing it and scribbling on it, to change it to third person, and then it just clicked. So I'm going to give you some nursing healthcare examples that might help, so hopefully it will click for you. What I would suggest you do is go back to a previous essay where you've got I scattered through one page, try and rewrite it in the third person, and you might find that it really clicks easily for you. But if you're unsure, then go and ask your tutor to look at it and get them to advise you. That's what they're there for. Or you might use study skills people at university, but it's something you can develop over time. So these simple examples: first person example, I prioritise patient handover during placement to develop core skills relating to whatever. Third person example, you could restructure it in different ways. I've put patient handover was prioritised during placement to develop core skills relating to, or you could put during placements, patient handover was prioritised to develop core skills. You don't need to use I throughout those sentences. So another example of first person versus third person. I completed a nursing assessment with a patient to meet their physical, psychological and social needs. Key literature suggests that we need to always use a holistic approach. So using words I and we show that this writer is using a first person perspective. Now, if a marker sees the we, they're going to probably say, who is we referring to? Is it referring to you, to other nurses, to medics, to you and the patient? It's not specific enough. So if we look at the third person example, a nursing assessment was completed with a patient to meet their physical, psychological and social needs. Key literature suggests that nurses need to always use a holistic approach. You can add references. So there's no need for I or we. It's being specific and keeping and you would be specific according to the references that you're using as well. So an even better example from the ones previously, the nursing assessment was completed with the patient using shared goal planning to meet their physical, psychological, social and spiritual needs. Literature suggests that shared goal planning facilitates a holistic approach as the individual is viewed as a whole and not a set of signs and symptoms. Now I'm going to be doing some future sessions on academic writing and being a bit more specific. So the previous examples didn't include shared goal planning. And it's almost like, how did you meet? So you can say the previous one said the nursing assessment was completed to meet physical, psychological, social, spiritual needs, but how? The difference is the shared goal planning, which gives you more marks. And then literature suggests that shared goal planning facilitates the holistic approach. Or it could be open communication, but you're saying a little bit more about how and why, and being more specific. So as I said, I'll be doing some more sessions on integrating references into text and getting deeper analysis in future sessions, and it's free to subscribe to my channel for the videos as well. So another comparison of first and third person. So this is everything on this page is first person. And it might link to an introduction, for example. So I have decided to reflect on an incident in my last placement where a healthcare assistant tried to give unsafe care to a patient. The healthcare assistant wanted me to move the patient up the bed on a bed sheet with them. I also saw the healthcare assistant ignore the patient when the patient refused to use the bed sheet. The patient said they wanted to use a hoist instead. We should always refuse as it can cause harm to the patient. I will link safety policies to this incident as they link to the issue. So this is an okay introduction. You're stating broadly what you're going to be looking at, but there's lots of I's. And again, you're using the word we. Who is we? Do you mean we should always refuse? Is it the nursing profession? Is it registered nurses? Is it the UK public, the NHS Trust? So think about whether you need additional words as well, like I have decided to. The last sentence also uses the word link twice, which you don't really need if you need to reduce your words down as well. So let's look at the third person example in comparison. So if we look at the third person example from the previous slide, within this assignment, an incident from placement will be reflected upon relating to the use of unsafe manual handling practices in a clinical setting. A healthcare assistant requested assistance to move a patient up a bed using a bed sheet. The request to help this healthcare assistant was declined as it was contrary to manual handling policy. The healthcare assistant was also observed ignoring the patient when the patient requested to use a hoist instead of a bed sheet. Using a bed sheet to slide a patient up a bed is against manual handling policies and health and safety laws, and it should never be attempted. Using incorrect manual handling procedures places the patient and nurse at risk of injury. Therefore, adherence to safe manual handling practices excuse me, and importance of staff education will be critically analysed within this essay using relevant literature. Excuse me. So you can see in this example, there's no I's, there's no we's in comparison to the first person example. It's not needed. And if you really wanted to put one in, it would be in sentence 2, I think. You could put a healthcare assistant requested my assistance to move a patient up a bed using a bed sheet, which I or the author refused, but you don't really need it. And if you were going to put it in, it would be there. But this it's more specific. It's talking about the actual policies as well. So I hope that's helpful as an example. So I've just got through my coughing fit from my previous slide. So this is a community example, first person. During a community visit, I had to redress a patient's chronic leg ulcer. It became apparent to me that this individual had not washed for a week and they were unusually unkempt. I knew the patient had the capacity to decide not to have a wash. However, I thought it was important to sympathetically communicate and listen to the patient to understand why they were neglecting themselves. It was evident to me from talking to the patient that they were upset as they had lost their dog. The patient talked to me and stated that there is no point carrying on, I'm so lonely. So from the previous first person example, I've literally kept all the sentences the same, but taken out the first person I and me. During a community visit to redress a patient's chronic leg ulcer, it became apparent that this individual had not washed for a week and they were unusually unkempt. The patient had the capacity to decide not to have a wash. However, it was important to sympathetically communicate and listen to the patient to understand why they were neglecting themselves. It was evident from talking to the patient that they were upset as they had lost their dog. The patient stated that there is no point carrying on, I'm so lonely. Then you can critically analyse areas such as loneliness in the older person or support available, the nurse's role linked to being present, communication skills, etc. Looking at the whole person. So it's quite a good example for a holistic or person-centered example. So just look at comparing the two. Now you can sort of see that this is more detached. It feels more detached to the first one. And sometimes when you're writing reflective essays, that's why sometimes the I or the me might go in one sentence, but you really don't need it. It's used sparsely. You don't need it through the whole of this. So it's just another example showing the difference between first and third person writing. So I hope that helps you, and do look at your assignments and try and have a go at changing pages that are littered with I. Try and write in that third person if possible. So here are a few of my free videos, and I'm going to be doing some future ones on integrating references in your narrative and improving critical analysis and synthesis that hopefully will help increase your marks in the future. So do subscribe to my channel if you're interested. The videos are all free, but on my channel now there is how to improve reflective essays, how to choose nursing dissertation, aims, objectives, SMART goals, preparing a nursing presentation for a university assessment. So you might find some of those helpful. And I've also got videos with lots of references that you might use for assignments. So some of the popular ones: person-centred care I've recently done, quality improvement and quality assurance, developing leadership skills, safe staffing in nursing. I look at the nursing tools and models. So it might be, you know, later in your course, if you're a first year, that you might use some of those as well. So if you've got any questions at all, put them in YouTube comments, or if you prefer to DM me on Twitter or my website rather than putting out comments publicly, I'm very happy to receive any questions. And if you're interested, I've got 2 books recently, second edition of How to Thrive as a Newly Registered Nurse, got lots and lots of references, so helpful for second, third year newly registered nurses. And then How to Prepare for Interviews and Develop Your Career, and that's right up to sort of band 8 really, with lots of advice on personal statements and interview advice. So anyway, I hope you found my video helpful.